Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Shevuot daf 10. We're going to start with a new opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. So to review briefly from our Mishnah, we have, I'm just going to revisit the chart from daf bet. So we have these different sacrifices. We start with the Olev Yored, which we said everyone agreed, Yediyah b'tchila, Yediyah b'sof v'helem b'intayim, right? That you knew about it before, you forgot you were impure, and then you went to the temple, and then you remembered that you were impure at the time. That's Korban Olev Yored. That's the sliding scale offering, depending on how wealthy you are. And that's only one of all these sacrifices that's an individual offering, right? All the other offerings, whatever opinions we take, are to cover the other kind of sacrifices, and they cover it for even, right? You don't bring your own sacrifice, it just covers anything that's been done in the interim that people either didn't knew about in the beginning but don't know about it now, or they didn't know about it in the beginning but they knew about it at the end. Okay, and it covers all these different types of offerings. So now Rabbi Ishmael says he has a different opinion, and he's going to put in another item into the category of Olav Yored. The first category, he's going to say it's not just where you knew about it in the beginning and you knew about it at the end and you forgot in the middle. But the Rabbi Ishmael de Amar, now we're starting with a question, okay, according to Rabbi Ishmael, who says, but first let's see what he says and then we'll see what they do with it. Ein b'yediyah b'tchila v'yesh b'yediyah b'sof bar korban hu. So if you know about it, you didn't know about it at the beginning. You didn't even know you were tamei. You walk into the temple and then you find out you were impure. Bar korban hu. Now, what does it mean, bar korban? All of these are bar korban, but not individual. What this is saying is you can even bring an individual Olev Yoreh korban. So if that's the case, now let's just look at our chart. Where did we have that category? That category for us was two over. It was the Seir, Hanasa B'chutz, and Yom Kippurim. So remember, there's the Seir, the goat that's brought in the inner sanctuary, and then there's the one brought in the outer area. The one that's brought outside the inner, right, the inner sanctuary, that one is to cover exactly what Rabbi Ishmael thinks the Olav Yored covers. Now, the seir that's done outside on Yom Kippur is not clearly not going to be covering something that our individual offerings cover. So seir nasa b'chutz hamayim mechapel. So then what are we doing with that category? What is that seir coming to do? You have to just think about this. It's really fascinating that we have all sorts of korbanot mentioned in the Torah that are communal sin offerings, that the Torah never tells us what these sin offerings are for. And here the rabbis are grappling with what is each one covering. So the answer given is al she'ein b'yediyah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof. Okay, now I'm purposely leaving up the chart because as soon as we say it's covering something, then that means it's covering something that we thought something else was covering, right? A different sacrifice was covering that. So which one is it covering? And you can already look. This is the one that's covered according to Rabbi Yehuda by the Sirei regalim and Sirei Rosh Chodesh. It covers a case that you didn't know about it before and you didn't know about it at the end. In other words, there's no yediyah at all. Now, if you remember, originally we said that this can't be the Siyar Nasa B'chutz B'Yom Kippurim, right? The one that's done B'chutz and the day of Yom Kippurim, right? But let's just focus on the sacrifice that's given outside on Yom Kippur can't be covering that according to what we said earlier, because there has to be some sort of yediyah, and that was based on the pasuk, if you remember, that you bring the series imchad l'chatat, milvad chatat kippurim, in addition to the chatat of the kippurim, which was the one that was done bifnim. And we learned that since these are two juxtaposed in the pasuk and actually like almost compared to each other, that's just like the one done inside. There's some sort of knowledge. This one also has to have some sort of knowledge. Rabbi Ishmael clearly doesn't hold that way. We're going to have to deal with what does he do with that hekesh. But right now, we're going to say, and the other thing we're going to have to deal with is what are the Sirei regalim and Sirei Rosh Chodesh doing? So now they say, wait, and that's going to be the first question we're going to ask. So if we're going to say that the Seir Nasa B'chutz is coming for a case where you didn't have Yediyah, not in the beginning, not at the end, Hi Sirei regalim Sirei Rosh Chodesh mechaprim. But wait, those are dealt with the Sirei regalim and Sirei Rosh Chodesh. To which the Gemara says, that shouldn't bother you. Because Sarbalaki Rabbi Meir, remember Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir said in the Mishnah, Dehamar, Kol Asirim Kapratan Shava, Al Tumat Mikdash V'Kodashav. Rabbi Meir said that all these three, any Seir, Zim, Chad, Chatat, the one that comes on Yom Kippur, the one that comes on all the holidays, and the one that comes on Rosh Chodesh. All of them are coming for the same things. Now, the same things when we had it in the Mishnah, we assumed it meant the same as what Rabbi Yehuda said, right? Ein b'yediah b'tchila, but yesh b'yediah b'sof, if you know about it at the end. Or ein b'yediah not b'tchila v'la b'sof, and tahor sha'achalat tamea, a pure person who eats something impure. But according to this, we definitely don't need it to cover which one? We don't need it to cover the one that has yediah b'tchila. Ein b'yediah b'tchila, but yesh b'yediah b'sof, because that one is already in the Ola v'Yoreh category. Okay, so we're going to end up with saying the Shiur nasa b'chutz and Yom Kippurim and the Shiur regalim and Shiur Rosh Chodesh are all covering. We now have two categories that are in common with all three of them. You didn't know about it in the beginning, and you still don't know about it. And number two, someone who's tahor, who ate something tameh. Now, why do you need all these ones to cover it? If Yom Kippur covers it, why do you need the regalim? If the regalim, why do you need Rosh Chodesh? Well, it's to cover all the time in between. That's if it's Rosh Chodesh, and then you get to Sukkot. So in those 15 days, right, this will cover you. Or I guess the truth is you have Yom Kippur in the middle. Yom Kippur will cover you between there and Sukkot. Sukkot will then cover you if it happened between then and the next Rosh Chodesh. The Rosh Chodesh one will cover you. It's basically to give opportunities all the time for atonement to be happening. Okay? In the worst case, you're going to have to wait a full month till Rosh Chodesh. So now the Gemara says, now we go back to our other question. Ela lamai hilchata itakish chitzon lepnimi. So then what's this hekesh for when it said milvat hatat kipulim? It seems to compare the series in Mechad Chatat and the Shiur that was done inside. Well, ma pnimi eno mechaper b'shar averot, af chitzon eno mechaper b'shar averot. Just like the inner one is not mechaper on other sins, and it only atones for the Shiur, for the Tum'at Mikdash v'Kodashav, any sort of impurity relating to the temple and sanctified items, right, sacrificial items. So likewise, the Chitzon eno mechaper b'shar averot. It's just coming to teach you that they're similar in one sense, which is these Shiurim are similar in the sense that they cover this topic only, Tum'at Mikdash v'Kodashav. Now we're moving on. Al she'ein b'yediah b'tchila v'lo b'sof. If you don't have yediah at all, sirei regalim u'sirei Rosh Chodeshim mechaprim divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're going back to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda didn't think that all three were the same. He thought that the Shiur on Rosh Chodeshim and the sirei regalim cover the same case, but the Shiur on Asa b'chutz, different from Rabbi Yishmael, we just said, actually only covers ein b'yediah b'tchila v'yesh b'yediah b'sof. So now we're going to say, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, my Tamid Rabbi Yehuda. So now we want to understand Rabbi Yehuda's position. Where does he get it from? Well, Amar Kra, Usir zimachad lechatat lahashem. This is a unique pasuk. You can look up the psukim. It's very helpful to have Bamidbar chapter 28 and chapter 29 open in front of you. And there it lists all the sacrifices of the holidays and of Rosh Chodeshim, and on Shabbat, what we bring. Right? This is where we read the maftir on all the holidays, and on Rosh Chodesh, the maftir we read from here tells us all the sacrifices. So he says, why is Sirei Rosh Chodeshim a case of ein b'yediah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof? So what he says is specific, and then we're going to learn from there to the regalim. He says there's a unique pasuk by, okay, remember, Series in Mechad Chatat comes up in all the places because there's always a series in Mechad Chatat on all the holidays on Rosh Chodeshim. But it says here, Series in Mechad Chatat LaHashem. In Rosh Chodesh, it specifically adds the word LaHashem. Doesn't say it anywhere else. What do we learn from LaHashem? Chet she'en makil bo ela Hashem yehei seir zamechapel. This seir should atone for things that only God knows. What does that mean? It means that I didn't know I was tamei, and I didn't even know afterwards that I was tamei. Not b'tchila, not b'sof, only God knows. So that's what this atones for. That's what Allah Hashem teaches you. To which the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute, Hashem teaches you that? No. Rish Lakish darshan something else from Hashem. And we know we have a rule. You can't darshan two things from one word. Why does it say Hashem specifically by Rosh Chodesh? They're going to give a very different reason, an inherent different reason for why Rosh Chodesh is different from every other holiday. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Seir ze yehe kapara al shemi'atati et hayareach. famous midrash about how the moon goes to God and says, how could it be me and the sun? We're both equal and it's unfair. We can't have two kings. It's not going to work that way. So God says, fine, I'll make you smaller, right? I'll make you diminish. This is why the moon gets smaller all the time, to make the moon, right? To basically say the sun is in charge. And then the moon got very upset because the moon said, this isn't fair. I asked you a question. Now I get to get punished. So God wanted to, okay, now here is a really big debate. Okay, but they say the se'irs there will be kapara on the fact that I made the moon smaller. So all the commentaries ask questions. How could God need atonement? First of all, some people say it's not that God needs atonement, it's that God needs to appease. The kapara here is not to get atonement, it's actually to appease the moon who is upset. Okay, even that raises questions. The moon doesn't get upset, it's not a person. But the best explanation I saw, which at least sits with me better, is that we're using this as an example to teach us about how we should act in the world. Giving God, right, personification of God, personification of the moon, is just teaching us how we should be in the world. So even if we do something bad to someone, we need to ask for forgiveness or we need to atone for it. Or, okay, we could take it to other places. Anyway, it's a big question what to do with this. The point is, though, that this is a special korban that has to do specifically with Rosh Chodesh because God needs this, okay, whatever it means, whatever God needs, God doesn't really need, but it's some sort of atonement or pardoning or appeasement of the moon for the fact that the moon is getting smaller, right? It gets smaller every month. And that obviously has to do with Rosh Chodesh, about the new moon. Well, now we have a problem. If Hashem is used for that, it can't be used for our pasuk. So, right, for our drasha, that again, it's a sin that only God knows about. We don't know about it. We didn't even realize we did it, and we don't know later that we did it, right? We still don't know that we did it after the fact. So, im kain lemakra al Hashem, my la Hashem l'chida amaran. It should be al Hashem if you wanted it to teach Rish Lakish, which is on behalf of God. What is La Hashem? La Hashem teaches both. So the way, right, the Hashem itself just said, if it had said Al Hashem or something like that, it would have meant the midrash about the moon. The fact that it says La Hashem, the way we word it, comes to teach us we can learn two things. Ve'ema kulei lahach. And I said, wait a minute. If it says La Hashem, maybe it's specifically then only come and teach our halacha. Maybe we don't learn what Rish Lakish said about the moon and all that. Right? So maybe it's only coming to teach what kind of sin this is atoning for. If it really wanted to say it's the chatat that only Hashem knows, it would have called it chatat Hashem. Why? La Hashem, Shema Min Atarte. So either which way we look at it, we can learn two things from there because there was a different way we could have written the pasuk. And the fact that we wrote it in this way comes to teach us two things. That's one of the usual techniques we use when we already have a drasha on one word. We say, well, it could have been worded that way, and we would have learned that. So we can therefore learn both things from the way it's worded. Now we have another question. So now why is this se'irizim that's atoning for things that God, right, that we don't know and only God knows, but specifically, again, like we said on Daf Bet, these are all relating to Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav. Maybe it should atone for all other sins. Why is it only atoning for those? Well, Tanit be Rabbi Yishmael, Hu'il v'zeh ba'bizman kavua, v'zeh ba'bizman kavua. Well, the one for Rosh Chodesh comes at a set time, and the one for Yom Kippur comes at a set time. Now, we already learned that the one for Yom Kippur comes for Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav, the series in Mechad Chatat, right? Ma zeh eino mechaper el al Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav, av zeh eino mechaper el al Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav. So we make a paradigm, right? Yom Kippur sets the paradigm. It's a series for Chatat. It's a set time that we do it a particular date in the calendar, and therefore it's going to be just like Rosh Chodesh. So whatever's true for there, it's Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav, also the Rosh Chodesh one, Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav. I want you to remember this comparison because we're going to come back to it later. We can learn from Yom Kippur of the one done outside to the one done on Rosh Chodesh. Now, this only answered half of the question on Rabbi Yehuda. We wanted to know what's the source for Rabbi Yehuda for the fact that Seir on Rosh Chodesh and the regalim is to cover a tahor, is to cover ein ba'yediah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof, and that he learns from La Hashem, right? That it's specifically things that God knows and we don't know. And obviously it's also Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav only. So but we didn't answer, how do we know? By the regalim. So Eshkachan, because we had a special drasha chatat laHashem. Eshkachan sirei Rosh Chodesh, sirei regalim minalam. But where do we get all the other holidays from? V'chite mahanami kedetana debei Rabbi Yishmael. Now, wait a minute. Why don't we just say, just like the Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, which is, right, we saw before, a second ago, just like we learned that Tumat Mikdash for Kodashav, the series Imachad L'Chatat on Yom Kippur is for Tumat Mikdash for Kodashav, and from there we learn to Rosh Chodeshim. Why don't we learn from there also to the regalim? To which they're going to say, Ika L'Mifra. Because, now, again, I should have said it a little better, but we could say either we could learn it from Rosh Chodesh to there, or we could learn it from Yom Kippur to there. Either which way, once we have it, and all of them have Zman Kavua, we can learn from one to the other. Now, if we learn from Yom Kippur, it would be just that it has to do with Tumat Mikdash. But if we learn from Rosh Chodesh, it would teach us specifically that it's Ein B'Yidiyah Lo B'Tchila V'Lo B'Self. Right? There's no knowledge of this whatsoever. But either which way, we can learn from either place, because Imi de Rosh Chodesh, it came to deal. Rosh Chodesh and Yom Kippur each have something unique. Rosh Chodesh happens frequently. Frequency is a strength. Because it happens frequently, it's not the same as the holidays, which happen once in a while. So maybe it's different. And Yom Kippurim, if we're going to learn from Yom Kippur, Shekem Merubah Kaparato. It's a day which is meant for atonement. So it could be we're giving you a special opportunity to atone for things there. We can't necessarily learn from the other holidays. The Teman, if you want to say, turning now to Amabet, but wait, you can't say Yom Kippur Kaparatom Rubeh, we can't learn anything from there because we just learned. The Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael said, oh, Yom Kippur is Man Kavua, Rosh Chodesh is Man Kavua, let's learn from Yom Kippur to Rosh Chodesh. So you can't say, oh, Yom Kippur has so much atonement, so we can't learn from there the holidays. If so, we can't learn from there to Rosh Chodesh, and we just did. But that's different. Okay, notice it was introduced from a v'chitema. If you were to say, I have a retort for that. Hatam kapara michtav ktiva. We already learned that there's a special pasuk there that says a word by Rosh Chodesh, which says la Hashem. And we assume that that's telling us something unique. Now, giluye milta ba'almahu. So when we use this drasha to get from Yom Kippur to Rosh Chodesh to say that the topic of Rosh Chodesh is that La Hashem is teaching us things that we don't know anything about, and it's within the realm of Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav that we learn from Yom Kippur, that's just telling us what this La Hashem is teaching us. So it's not such a big deal to learn from one to the other because we already know we're supposed to learn something, and this just helps us learn it. So even though Yom Kippur has a lot of extra atonement, we can still learn from there to Rosh Chodesh because there's something in the pasuk that's telling us there's something to learn here, and we're just looking for what it is. So it's just kind of revealing to us what we're missing. But when it comes to the holidays, you could say, no, we can't learn it all from Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur is a day with a lot of atonement. We don't have any specific unique word that's telling us this is including something unique, so we can't learn it from there. So where do we learn the regalim from? So we can't learn it from Rosh Chodesh because Rosh Chodesh is very common. We can't learn it from Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur has a lot of extra atonement. Ela keda'amar Rabbi Chama b'Rabbi Chanina, sa'il v'sa'il. It should have said in the pasuk se'ir izim achad l'chatat, but instead it says by Rosh Chodesh and actually by many of the holidays. It says it's actually more important this by the holidays and se'ir izim achad l'chatat. It happens to also say it by Rosh Chodesh. And there's one holiday, Shavuot, where it doesn't say it, but all the other holidays, and including all the days of Sukkot, which have their own unique korbanot, and it says each one, it says, and bring a se'irizim for chatat. That word and connects it with the previous. Now, before the holidays, the list of the holidays is Rosh Chodesh. So if it connects it with the previous, the Vav is basically telling you, now, I just want to read this inside, but the Vav is telling you that what's true above is true here. So whatever Rosh Chodesh comes to cover, this comes to cover the same as well. Now, first of all, I want to just tell you the simple reading of those psukim and why it says end is because it lists all the sacrifices for each holiday. And then it says, and also bring a series of chatat. So the Vav clearly, for the simple reading of the pasuk, has to do with the context of that holiday. Bring this and that and that and that. Okay, but in the world of drashot, we can connect all the psukim that say, and bring a series for a sin offering. Now let's just look at the words because there's something I didn't explain yet, which is, so Just like he says, and we're going to see this on the next daf, he says it somewhere else that we're going to darshan the vav. The reason why they write seir, vis seir, is it should have been written seir, but it is actually written with a vav. Hachanami, so just like he uses it for a drasha, which we'll see in tomorrow's daf, hachanami seir vis seir. Same thing we're going to say here. Okay, meaning by us, we're going to connect between the holidays are learned out from Rosh Chodesh. And that's how we get why Rabbi Yehuda says, right? We prove from La Hashem that the Chatat on Rosh Chodesh is specifically without any yedi'ah at all, only God knows. And from there, from the Vav, we learn also to the holidays. V'itakush sirei regalim l'sirei Rosh Chodeshim. And then we're going to say, right? So then we make the comparison from the Vav and say what's true for one is true for the other. This is just a review of what I said. Since the sirim of Rosh Chodeshim einam mechaplim ela al she'ein b'yedi'ah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof, they only cover ones that we have no knowledge of, not now, not before. We didn't know we were impure. And after we went into the temple, we still don't know that we were impure at the time. Af sirei regalim einam mechaplim ela al she'ein b'yedi'ah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof. So likewise, the sirim on the holidays do not atone for things that we didn't know about, not in the beginning, not at the end, same thing. And there we got our answer. Okay? So just to review, what we did so far in the stuff was two things. We dealt with Rabbi Ishmael's unique approach, which we didn't know before, where he moved what we thought. We do bachutz, right? The seir bachutz, or at least according to the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda, it was the seir bachutz covers ones that we only have yedi'ah at the end. We then moved that to the Korban Levi Yored, and we had to fill that in with something else. We said, we fill it in with what the Sirei Regalim and Sirei Rosh Chodeshim come to, right? And we basically combine those all, okay? And then we said, right, this whole, Rabbi Ishmael must hold by Rabbi Meir's approach that all three of those cover the same areas, even though when we saw Rabbi Meir, we thought it covered an additional area, but the concept that they all cover the same thing, that's that concept. Then we brought Rabbi Yehuda's opinion about the Sirei Regalim and Sirei Rosh Chodeshim are mechaplim an she'en b'yedi'ah b'tchila v'lo. So we didn't have yedi'ah in the beginning, but we do, and we also don't have yedi'ah at the end, and that we darshaned out. First Rosh Chodeshim, and then we got to where do we get the regalim from there? Okay, two drashot, La Hashem taught us about Rosh Chodeshim, and the Vav basically juxtaposes them all to each other and learns the regalim from Rosh Chodesh. Now we have another question of Rabbi Yehuda. Ibayilhu. Ki amar Rabbi Yehuda al she'en b'yedi'ah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof. Now we're going to have two possibilities about what this means. Hani mile b'chet she'en sofo livada. Is this only about a sin that we'll never know? Meaning, let's say I walked in a field where there was impurity and I became impure, but nobody knows that there's dead bodies under there. Is that what it's coming to? So we'll never find out. Or, right, but if it eventually will be known, meaning it's a case where I walk through a field wherever people know there's dead people. I just didn't know that. And I went into the temple and I still don't know. But eventually I can find out. Is that is it like a case where where I do know in the end, even though I don't know yet? But since I will eventually know, maybe it's treated like that. And then according to Rabbi Yehuda, that would be in the category of the seir that was done outside, and Yom Kippurim will atone for me. O Dilma, or is it possible that afilu chet shesafo livada, or, and this is really the way I understood it originally, even if eventually we'll find out, hashtemia chet she'em makir bo ela Hashem krinam be, ela Hashem krinam be. This is because right now I don't know. This is considered a sin that only God knows because I happen to have not found out yet. So therefore, it's like a sin that only God knows because nobody knows it right now, even though eventually it'll be found out. So, like we thought when we said you didn't know about it in the beginning, you still don't know about it, but maybe eventually you will. So, which category is that in? Does that mean no yedi'ah at all, or is it more like? Maybe it's like the one who there is yedi'ah in the end because there will be or likely will be in the end some knowledge. Well, Tashma, let's learn it from here, from a Braita de Tanya. Al she'en b'yedi'ah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof v'chet shesafo livada. Okay, a case where we don't know, not in the beginning, not in the end, and a chet shesafo livada, and a sin that will eventually be known. Sirei regalim u'sirei rosh chodeshim mechaplim. So there you have it. even though eventually it will become revealed. Since it's not revealed now, that's covered by the Rosh Chodesh and the holiday. It's the same category as we thought before, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. And that's Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're moving on to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Sirei regalim mechaplim, we're in the first version of Rabbi Shimon, aval lo sirei Rosh Chodeshim. So let's pull up our chart again. Rabbi Shimon holds the Sirei, he thinks that everything has a different purpose. So the Sirei regalim are the ones that cover Ein b'yediah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof, the ones we've been talking about. But Rosh Chodeshim are only covering tahor she'achal tameh. Totally different topic. So now we're going to try to figure out what's his reason. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yoshaya, my time is Rabbi Shimon. What's his reason? Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Ve'ota natan lachem laset et avon ha'edah." Okay, this is a pasuk about Rosh Chodesh, and it's actually a pasuk with the whole scene of right after Nadav and Avihu die. There's this chatat. It happened on Rosh Chodesh on the 8th day of the Miluim, which was Rosh Chodesh. And God says to Aaron and Moshe, "Madua lo achaltem et hachatat b'mkom hakodesh?" Why didn't you eat the meat from the sin offering in the sanctified place? Ki kodesh kodeshimu, because it's high-level sanctity. Va'ata ota natan lachem, and this is what I gave to you. Now, notice he's talking about Shiur chatat of Rosh Chodesh. And this I gave to you, laset et avon ha'edah lechaper lehem lefnei Hashem. I gave this to you to take upon the iniquity of the community, to atone for them before God. Okay, how are we going to get from here to tahor she'achalat kodesh? So let's see. It says, "Otana tamachem lasetet avon ha'edah." The high crab is Shiur de Rosh Chodesh, as I explained to you. That is talking clearly about the Shiur and Rosh Chodesh. The Yalef avon mitzitz. And now we're going to do Gzera Shav. It says avon ha'edah. And by the tzitz, it says avon. Now, what is the tzitz? Okay, let's just read a minute. Ne'amar kan avon, v'ne'amar lahalan avon. Okay, here's the pasuk by the tzitz. V'haya al metzach Aharon. This is the forehead plate that the Aharon would wear. It's a kodesh laHashem on it. Nasa Aharon et avon hakodeshim asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael l'chomano kedushatan. Okay, now what would he do? He would wear this all the time while they were sacrificing, while they were bringing sacrifices. V'haya mitzchot tamid le'ratzon lahem lifnei Hashem. And it would provide ratzon. Ratzon is ritzui. It would provide atonement for them. For what? For any meat or blood or anything that was brought on the altar that was impure. It dealt with impurity of food, blood, sacrificial items. So the subject of the avon there is not the person, which we were talking about before, but it's until now, Tum'ah Mikdash v'Kodeshav is a person who was impure. All of a sudden, Rabbi Shimon introduced this tahor she'achalat tameh, a pure person who ate something that was impure, where the impurity was on the object. Well, since we have Gzera Shava between the tzitz and the Seir chatat of Yom Kippur, we say, we learn one from the other. Just like the tzitz covers, okay, ma lahalan tum'at basal, it's the meat itself that became impure. Avkan tumat basal, same thing by the chatat. The chatat covers impure meat. Now, what would be the problem with impure meat? Right? If it's on the altar, the tzitz covers it. So it must be talking about, it's basically atoning for sins that somebody ate impure sacrificial meat. But then the Gemara says, wait a minute. If we're really learning from the tzitz, we should learn completely from the tzitz. Now, what meat are we talking about in the tzitz, that the tzitz atones for? Meat that's burned on the altar. So if that's the case, imala halan olin, afkan olin, maybe the chatat only deals with meat that's burnt on the altar, and not meat like we're generally talking about, meat that people, like, let's say you bring a korban shlamim and you go to eat the meat of the korban shlamim and you happen to be impure at the time, you would be punished, right? That would be what, and this would need to atone for your punishment if it was done unwittingly. So, but that didn't go on the altar. So they say no. It's because by us, it says avon ha'edaktiv, which means it's not the meat that goes on the altar, it's the meat that people eat, because it's the edah, it's the people that need the atonement, not the objects. So now they say, okay, well, we get that. It's different, okay? But michti mikmar gamre mehadade, but since we learn that from one from the other, we can learn from the chatat, about the chatat from the tzitz, and they both say the word avon, nichapir de Rosh Chodesh adidei ve'ad tzitz. Maybe Rosh Chodesh can cover itself and the things that are covered by the tzitz. Nafkamina, like when would we need that? Lehecha dinishbar tzitz. Let's say the tzitz breaks. Since we have this gzera shava, why don't we say that the se'irizim for chatat can cover sins like burning meat on the altar that was already impure? So Amakra avon, because it says, what's the purpose of the chatat? Nasa Aaron et avon ha'id. I'm sorry. Otan natan lachem laseit et avon ha'ida. Now, notice avon is singular. Avon echad hu noseh ve'en noseh shnei avonot. It doesn't cover two sins. So it can't cover the things of the tzitz. Maybe the reverse, though. Maybe the tzitz could cover the things that the se'irizim l'chatat covers. Maybe the tzitz could cover its own stuff, and also what Rosh Chodesh atones for, which is a pure person eating impure sacrificial items. Nafkamina, what would be a nafkamina? L'tuma dira ben zeh lezeh. Like, let's say you're in between Rosh Chodeshes and you mess something up on you eat impure food. Maybe the atonement could come immediately if the Kohen's wearing the tzitz. And maybe that could cover you, and so you don't have to wait till Rosh Chodesh for that atonement to kick in. Again, you don't know, but although it's not so clear with the Tomei Shachalat HaTahor, Tahor Shachalat HaTamei, whether it's unknowing or not unknowing. Maybe it's even intentional. It's not so clear. But maybe that. To which the answer, Amakra Ota. Well, again, this is by the pasuk in Rosh Chodesh. It says, this was given to you to bear the iniquity. Now they say, what's Ota? Ota is a very specific phrase. Ota, Ota noseh avon ve'en acheret noseh avon. Only this can atone for it, and nothing else. And that's why the tzitz can't cover what the Rosh Chodesh Seir covers. Rav Ashi gives a different reason, and he says, look at the context. K'tiv hacha, even though we can learn avon, each one has a word that goes with the avon. Okay? K'tiv hacha avon ha'edah, it says the avon of the people, the sin of the people by the chatat. Edah velo kodashim, from there you learn only covers the community and not the kodshim themselves, right? If the meat was burnt on the altar and it was impure. V'hatam k'tiv avon kodashim velo edah. And likewise by the tzitz, it covers iniquities relating to the sacrificial item, not to the humans who eat the sacrificial items. And therefore, each one is unique. So we have two different explanations as to why each is unique. Okay, last question for today, and we won't really answer it. So we get then why Rabbi Shimon, that explained the first part of Rabbi Shimon, or the last part of Rabbi Shimon really, which is that Rosh Chodesh comes for tahor shachalat tatameh. But how do we know? Where does he get regalim de mechaper al she'em b'yediah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof minalan? Where does he get the regalim cover? The person who doesn't know he was impure, not before and not after. How do we know? And that we will leave as an open question, and you'll have to wait till Sunday's daf to get the answer to that. Okay, so what did we do today? We really went through the different approaches trying to understand them. We started with Rabbi Yishmael, which was a new approach, and then what we really had to deal with him was not what's the root of his opinion, but if he takes something that we thought was attributed to the seir that's done b'chutz and Yom Kippur, the seir chad l'chatat, what does he do with that? And we said, right, that korban goes together with the regalim and the Rosh Chodeshim, and it's all one and the same. And he goes with the theory of Rabbi Meir that those three are all one category. Then we went to Rabbi Yehuda, and we explained what's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda, who distinguishes and says that the se'irizim on Rosh Chodesh and the regalim are the same, and they cover ein b'yediah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof. First, he proved it by Rosh Chodesh. From there, we got to the regalim. Then we moved into this question about Rabbi Yehuda. If you don't have yediah, but what if it'll never be found out? Is that right? What if it might be found out down the road? Do we call that yediah or do we not call that yediah? And which one is it atoned by? Because does it go with the one that has no knowledge at all, or does it go with the one that has knowledge at the end? Because in the end, you might end up with not knowing about it. And we proved no, it really goes with not having knowledge, because at this point, you don't have the knowledge of it. And then we just finished with Rabbi Shimon, which is we started really the first part, and we explained on what basis does Rabbi Shimon say that the seir of Rosh Chodesh covers tahor shachalat tatameh, and that we got from Gzeira Shava to the tzitz. We tried to say maybe we could take the Gzeira Shava farther, and they said no, you can't. And we had two reasons why you can't take it any farther, and basically say that that covers what the tzitz covers, and the tzitz covers what Rosh Chodesh covers, and that's a good review of our daf. With that, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shavuot Tov.